There are moments in the British royal family that nobody plans for in advance. Moments that do not come with a press release, do not appear on the official calendar weeks ahead of time, and do not get announced with great fanfare on the palace steps. They happen quietly, sometimes in a drawing room where only a handful of people are present, sometimes across a table set with fine china and soft afternoon light. And yet these moments carry more weight than any state ceremony, more meaning than any public parade, because they are real. They are personal, and they change things in ways that the outside world takes a long time to fully understand. This is one of those moments. It begins with a woman who has spent more than 5 decades serving the British crown without complaint, without seeking applause, without bending to trends or public pressure. A woman who once stood on an Olympic podium, who has visited war zones, who has carried out nearly 500 official engagements in a single year, who has never in her long life asked for recognition she did not earn. Her name is Anne, the Princess Royal, and she is, by almost every measure, the hardest-working royal Britain has ever produced. And then there is the other woman, younger, softer in her public presentation, a woman who came from outside the royal world and had to learn its rhythms the hard way, who married into a family carrying the weight of history and walked into rooms where every eye was measuring her, judging her, deciding whether she belonged, who faced not just the pressure of public expectation but a health crisis so serious it removed her from public life for most of a year, and who came back anyway, stronger, more certain, more herself. Her name is Catherine, and she is the Princess of Wales. What happened between these two women, the veteran and the future, the old guard and the new, is a story about the kind of respect that cannot be faked. The kind of recognition that does not come from kings or constitutions, but from one woman choosing to honor another. It is a story about what it truly means to carry a title not just in name, but in character. To understand what Princess Anne did, you first have to understand who Princess Anne is. Not the version of her that gets discussed in headlines or appears in brief clips of royal engagements, but the real woman behind the title. Because Anne is not someone who gives things away easily. She does not distribute praise the way some royals do, with practiced smiles and rehearsed warmth. She is precise. She is direct. When she approves of something, it means something. And when she makes a gesture that the royal world recognizes as significant, people pay attention. Anne was born on the 15th of August, 1950, the second child of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. From the very beginning, she was different from her brothers. Where Charles was cautious and reflective, Anne was bold. Where her brothers sometimes craved attention, Anne seemed almost quietly annoyed by it. She grew up in palaces but carried herself like someone who had earned her place through effort rather than birth. And in many ways, that is exactly the story she went on to write for herself across the decades that followed. Her first official engagement came in 1969 when she was just 18 years old. She met Welsh soldiers at a ceremony in Shropshire, stood straight, spoke clearly, and gave those around her the immediate impression that she was not there to be decorative. She was there to work. That attitude never left her. Over the next 5 decades, she would carry out more official engagements than almost any other member of the royal family, year after year, without complaint, without fanfare, and without any apparent need for the public to applaud what she was doing. She showed up because she believed it mattered, not because she needed anyone to tell her it did. By 2025, Princess Anne had completed 478 official engagements in a single year. That number is staggering when you actually sit with it. It means that on average, she was representing the crown somewhere in the world more than once a day, every single day, across 12 full months. She attended agricultural conferences in January and military ceremonies in February. She visited charities and schools in the spring and hospitals and regiments in the summer. She traveled across the United Kingdom and far beyond its borders, to Commonwealth nations that have maintained their connection to the royal family not out of obligation, but because of the consistent, reliable presence of royals exactly like her. People who show up without being asked twice. The numbers alone are remarkable, but they do not tell the full story, because it is not just how many engagements Princess Anne completes that sets her apart. It is the quality of presence she brings to each one. She does not skim the surface. She does not shake hands and move on without looking at the person in front of her. Those who have worked with her in her charitable and military roles consistently speak of someone who is genuinely engaged, someone who knows the details, someone who has read the briefings and asks the questions that nobody expected her to ask. She is not performing care. She is actually paying attention. She holds affiliations with more than 300 military regiments, charitable organizations, and professional bodies across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. She is Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Corps of Signals, a role she has held since 1977. She is Colonel-in-Chief of the King's Royal Hussars, the Royal Logistic Corps, and the Royal Army Veterinary Corps. She holds the position of Colonel-in-Chief in more than 20 British and Commonwealth regiments stretching from Canada to Australia to New Zealand, a web of connections built not through inherited obligation, but through decades of personal engagement with the men and women who serve in those units. She has visited them in peacetime and in difficult periods. She has attended their ceremonies and their memorials. She has learned their histories and their traditions. And they have returned that investment with a loyalty and affection that is unmistakable to anyone who has seen it. She holds the honorary rank of Admiral in the Royal Navy, General in the Army, and Air Chief Marshal in the Royal Air Force. These are the highest ranks in each service, and they were not simply given to her as a courtesy. They reflect a relationship with the armed forces that began in 1974 when she was appointed Chief Commandant of the Women's Royal Naval Service, a role she took seriously from the first day. In subsequent years, she would receive promotions that brought her Army and Air Force ranks into line with the Admiral's rank she held in the Navy, following the long-standing tradition of military promotions for members of the royal family who have demonstrated sustained commitment to their service roles. In 1970, when she was just 19 years old, Princess Anne became president of Save the Children UK. That relationship has now lasted more than 50 years. She did not simply lend her name to a letterhead. She traveled to some of the most difficult places on Earth, to communities in Africa, to regions affected by famine and disease, to areas where children were living in circumstances that most of the people watching palace proceedings from comfortable armchairs could barely imagine. She went without the elaborate media arrangements that sometimes accompany royal charitable work. She went because she believed the cause was important, and she has continued going because her belief in it has never wavered. In 1990, the president of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, nominated her for the Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of the scale and sincerity of her contribution. In May 2025, she became the first member of the entire British royal family to visit Little Sark, a small island in the Channel Islands. She traveled there on behalf of King Charles to mark the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the bailiwick. It was not a glamorous assignment. It was not the kind of visit that produces the photographs that end up on magazine covers. It was the kind of work that fills the spaces between the big moments, the kind of work that keeps the institution alive and connected to the people and places it is meant to serve. And Anne went because that is what she does. The British public understands this about her, perhaps more than they are always given credit for. In a YouGov survey conducted in January 2026, Princess Anne held a 70% positive approval rating among the British public. To put that number in perspective, Queen Camilla held 42% in the same survey, and Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, held 50%. King Charles himself held 60%. Princess Anne, the woman who never runs a social media account, who gives no intimate interviews to glossy magazines, who has never in her life curated a personal brand or hired a publicist to manage her image, held 70%. She did it by showing up, doing the work, and letting the work speak for itself. And apparently after 56 years of this, it does. The title of Princess Royal was conferred upon her by Queen Elizabeth II on the 13th of June, 1987. It is one of the oldest and most meaningful titles in the British royal tradition, and it is given to the eldest daughter of the monarch. It is a title that belongs to Anne for the duration of her life. It cannot be transferred through ceremony, cannot be passed to another person through any formal mechanism. And yet within the royal world, there exists another category of titles entirely. The unofficial ones. The ones conferred not by proclamation but by recognition, not by institution but by person. These are the titles that carry the most meaning because they have to be earned from someone who does not give them away lightly. To understand why what happened between Anne and Catherine mattered so much, it is important to understand what Catherine's journey had actually looked like from the inside, not just from the outside where the photographs are taken and the narratives are assembled. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was born Catherine Middleton, the eldest daughter of Michael and Carol Middleton, a couple who had built a successful family business from a modest beginning, and who had raised their children with a combination of warmth and ambition that would prove useful in ways none of them could have predicted. Catherine was educated at Marlborough College and later at the University of St Andrews in Scotland, where she met Prince William in 2001. The relationship between them would take years to fully develop, and by the time they finally became engaged in 2010, Catherine had spent nearly a decade in the orbit of the royal family, learning its rhythms, building her composure, figuring out who she was going to be when the full weight of the role finally arrived. The wedding in April 2011 was watched by hundreds of millions of people around the world. In the weeks and months that followed, observers noted that Catherine moved through her new role with a naturalness that surprised many people who had expected someone more visibly uncertain. She was not awkward in the receiving lines. She was not stiff at the ceremonies. She was present, warm, and consistently composed in situations where even experienced royals sometimes struggled to find their footing. People who had expected to see someone being gradually shaped into a royal quickly understood that Catherine had done a significant amount of that shaping herself, quietly and without announcement, in the years before the wedding. But composure is not the same thing as ease, and the years that followed the wedding brought challenges that no amount of preparation could fully cushion. She was scrutinized at a level that very few human beings have to endure. Her body, her clothing, her friendship group, her family background, her relationship with her in-laws, her parenting choices, all of it became public property in ways that were sometimes celebrated, sometimes cruel, and always relentless. There were photographers outside every venue she entered. There were commentators ready to interpret every gesture, every expression, every choice she made. And through all of it, she maintained a public face that was steady, warm, and gracious, while behind it, she was simply a person trying to do an enormously difficult job as well as she could. She became the Princess of Wales in September 2022, when Queen Elizabeth II died and King Charles acceded to the throne. The title came with expectations that would have been daunting for anyone. It was, after all, the title most recently held by Diana, a woman whose memory has never faded, and whose presence in the public imagination remains as vivid today as it was in the decade before her death. There were people who could not look at Catherine wearing the title without measuring her against Diana. There were commentators who seemed to regard Catherine's version of the role as inherently lesser, or at least perpetually provisional. Catherine never addressed this publicly. She simply continued to do the work. In April 2024, King Charles made a gesture on St. George's Day that signaled something important about how he regarded his daughter-in-law. He named Catherine a royal companion of the Order of the Companions of Honor, making her the first member of the royal family ever to receive this particular distinction. The order was founded in 1917 by King George V and exists to recognize outstanding contributions in the arts, sciences, medicine, and public service. Its current membership includes figures like Elton John, Paul McCartney, and J.K. Rowling, people who have defined their fields and left a lasting mark on the cultural life of the country. For Charles to place Catherine in that company was a statement. It said that what she had already accomplished, in a relatively short time, in a remarkably public and scrutinized way, was worth recognizing at that level. Then, in early 2024, came the news that changed everything. Catherine revealed in March of that year that she had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy. The announcement was received with a wave of public concern and affection that surprised even some of those closest to the royal family. It became clear, in the weeks and months that followed, how deeply the public had come to care about her specifically. Letters arrived at the palace. Messages filled the royal family's social media platforms. People who had never given much thought to royal affairs found themselves thinking about Catherine, hoping for her, willing her through something that would test even the most resilient of people. She was away from public life for most of 2024. Her husband, Prince William, was regularly photographed alone at engagements where they would normally have appeared together. The gaps left by her absence were visible and felt, and during that time, the working members of the royal family who remained active, among them, Princess Anne, absorbed additional weight without complaint, and without any suggestion that the burden was unwelcome. Anne completed 457 engagements in 2024, then 478 in 2025, a 10% increase at age 75. She did not slow down. She did not request public recognition for the extra effort. She simply continued doing exactly what she had always done, because that is the only mode Princess Anne has ever operated in. By September 2024, Catherine announced that she had completed her course of chemotherapy. In a moving video featuring William and their 3 children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, she said that the previous 9 months had been incredibly tough, that she was looking forward to returning to the things that mattered to her, that she was, though the path ahead was still long, moving in the right direction. The public exhaled collectively, and slowly, carefully, Catherine began to come back. Her gradual return through the remainder of 2024, and then into 2025, was watched as closely as anything the royal family had produced in years. Each appearance was noted and commented on. Each engagement she attended became its own small story about resilience and return. By January 2026, she held a 74% positive approval rating, the highest of any member of the royal family, including her husband. The woman who had been away, who had been ill, who had fought something that the public had watched with helpless concern, had returned, and she had returned as someone the country appeared to have decided it could not do without. It was in this atmosphere of recovery and return, of a royal family navigating its own pressures and transitions, of a Princess Royal who had held the line while others could not, and of a Princess of Wales who had come back more fully herself than she had perhaps ever been, that Princess Anne made her move. Not dramatically, not publicly, but with the kind of deliberate, meaningful intention that has always characterized everything Anne does. And when the weight of what she had done began to settle, those who knew both women well understood that something rare had happened, something that the palace walls had quietly absorbed, and that the rest of the world was only beginning to learn to read. There is a way that certain women in the British royal family have always communicated what they think of each other, and it is almost never through words. It is through presence, through the particular kind of attention they choose to pay when they are in the same room, through the things they do publicly at moments when they know the world is watching and the interpretation will travel far. And it is through the things they do privately, in the quieter spaces between the ceremonies, that carry even more meaning precisely because they are not designed for public consumption. Princess Anne has spent her entire adult life in a family that runs largely on unspoken codes. She understands better than almost anyone that in this world, what you do matters more than anything you say. She has lived that principle every day for more than 5 decades. She has carried it into every engagement, every charity visit, every regimental inspection, every quiet evening meal at a palace where the people sitting around the table are working through something that will never be discussed in public. So when Princess Anne decided to honor Catherine, she did not call a press conference. She did not instruct a palace communications official to draft a statement. She did not arrange for the story to be leaked to a friendly journalist who would shape the narrative on her behalf. She did what Anne always does. She acted, and she allowed the action to speak slowly and unmistakably for itself. The first thing that must be understood is the nature of what was being passed between them. When people hear the word title in connection with the royal family, they tend to think of the formal designations that appear in the official gazette or in the court circular. Princess Royal, Lady of the Garter, Commander of the Royal Victorian Order. These are real and significant honors, and they carry specific privileges and responsibilities. But what Princess Anne extended to Catherine was something that exists in a different register. It was the informal title that the royal world's most demanding and respected figures confer when they decide that someone has proved themselves in ways that go beyond the ceremonial. It was the recognition of a peer, not a subordinate to be managed or a newcomer to be assessed, not someone to be watched from a distance and evaluated against a checklist of royal competencies. A peer, someone who has been through something real and has come out of it in a way that earns the specific respect of those who have been through real things themselves. And for Anne to confer that recognition on Catherine was significant in a way that cannot be fully captured by any formal description of what was exchanged, because it required Anne to look at Catherine and decide, without any external pressure to do so, that the assessment was deserved. By March 2026, the 2 women appeared together at the Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey. It was an annual event, important on the royal calendar, attended by members of the family in their official capacities. The day was filmed, photographed, and reported on extensively. And in the middle of the official proceedings, something happened that was small enough to miss if you were not paying attention, and large enough to become one of the most discussed moments of the royal year if you were. Catherine and Anne encountered each other in the arrival sequence, in that careful choreography of royal greetings that the family has refined over generations into something that appears entirely natural, and is in fact entirely deliberate. Anne greeted William with a kiss on each cheek. It was the standard royal greeting, warm and familiar, the greeting of an aunt who has known her nephew since he was a small boy, and who has been alongside him through some of the hardest periods of his life. Then she turned to Catherine. She did not offer the same kiss, not because she was cold or distant or signaling disapproval. A reporter at the Daily Mail who was present captured the moment precisely. There was simply no way Princess Anne was going to attempt a kiss under a hat like the one Catherine was wearing that day, a wide-brimmed navy Sean Barrett chapeau that made the usual greeting physically impractical. And so instead, they laughed. They exchanged a moment of pure, unrehearsed warmth, the kind of warmth that only exists between people who are genuinely at ease with each other, who do not need the formality to prove their mutual regard. It was a small thing. But for those who have studied the body language and interpersonal dynamics of this family over many years, it was also revealing. These were not two women going through the motions of politeness. These were two women who actually liked each other. The approval ratings told their own version of this story. In the same YouGov survey, Catherine held 74% and Anne held 70%. When you understand how those numbers are assembled, how rare it is for any public figure to hold that level of sustained positive regard from the British public, and how even more rare it is for two members of the same family to both sit at that level simultaneously, the significance becomes clearer. These are two women who have each, independently and through very different paths, built something real with the people of Britain. That commonality is not nothing. It is actually the foundation on which genuine mutual respect can be constructed. But the story of what passed between them is not simply a story about shared approval ratings or a charming moment at a Commonwealth Day service. It is a story about something that happened over a longer period of time, in quieter circumstances, that the Commonwealth Day moment was only the most publicly visible expression of. Kensington Palace confirmed in April 2026 that Catherine would join Princess Anne for Anzac Day commemorations across London, an annual observance marking the sacrifice of Australian and New Zealand soldiers in conflicts that stretch back more than a century. It was not a glamorous assignment. Anzac Day is a day of remembrance, a day of solemnity, a day when the weight of loss is the point. Catherine would lay a wreath at the cenotaph on behalf of King Charles. Anne would attend the dawn service at Wellington Arch. Both women, on the same day, in different parts of London, representing the crown in moments that required not performance but genuine reverence. The pairing mattered, because Anzac Day is one of the engagements most closely associated with Princess Anne's long record of service to Commonwealth nations and their military connections. She has attended Australian and New Zealand commemorations for decades. She is Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Australian Corps of Signals and the Royal Australian Corps of Transport. She holds deep, personal, long-standing ties with the armed forces and with the communities that mark these occasions. For Catherine to take on a central role in those same commemorations, in that same calendar space, was not accidental. It was the visible result of a process of trust-building and role transfer that had been happening for some time. There is a particular kind of diplomacy in the way Princess Anne operates within the royal family, and it is easy to miss if you are not looking for it. She is not someone who offers endorsements freely. She is not someone who goes out of her way to publicly affirm other family members in ways that could be read as performative or strategic. When she does something that implies approval, it carries weight precisely because it is not something she does lightly or often. She also holds a position within the family that is unique. She is not in the line of succession in any meaningful sense. She does not carry the political weight of the heir or the institutional weight of the sovereign. She carries something different, and in some ways more durable, the weight of institutional memory and the authority that comes from having been present and working through every significant moment of this family's modern history. She was there before William was born. She was working before Catherine knew what a royal engagement was. She has outlasted crises and controversies and internal upheavals and public scandals that would have broken people with less internal stability. And she has done it all without losing her sense of self, without bending to pressure, without compromising the particular version of royal service that she decided to embody when she was still a teenager, standing in front of Welsh soldiers in Shropshire. When Princess Anne looks at someone and decides they are ready, it means something quite specific. It means she has assessed their capacity for work, their resilience under pressure, their genuine commitment as opposed to their performed commitment, their ability to be present in difficult circumstances without breaking. These are the standards she applies to herself. They are the only standards she knows how to apply to anyone else. Catherine's cancer diagnosis and her handling of it provided Anne with something she could not have observed under any ordinary circumstances. It provided a genuine test. Not a test of Catherine's ability to wear the right outfit or say the right thing in a receiving line, but a test of what she is actually made of underneath the composure and the careful public presentation. And what Anne saw was a woman who faced something terrifying with extraordinary dignity, who made the choice to be honest with the public about what was happening rather than hiding behind vague statements until she was ready to return, who used her own painful experience to create a moment of public vulnerability that ended up connecting her more deeply to the people of Britain than almost anything else she had done in her royal career, and who, when she was ready to come back, came back fully, not tentatively, not partially, but with the same steadiness and commitment that she had shown before she got sick, only more certain somehow about what she was there to do. Anne watched all of this. She notices things. She remembers things. She processes information about the people around her with an efficiency that people who have worked alongside her always comment on. She saw what Catherine did in 2024, and she saw what Catherine was becoming as 2025 and then 2026 unfolded, and she made a determination. The formal mechanism through which this determination was expressed took several forms, both official and unofficial, both public and private. On the official side, Catherine had already been named a grantor of royal warrants by King Charles in mid-2025, making her the first Princess of Wales in 100 years to hold that authority. She had already been named to the Order of the Companions of Honor on St. George's Day 2024. These were significant recognitions, and both of them signaled clearly that the institution regarded Catherine as someone who had moved beyond the stage of being assessed into the stage of being trusted with genuine responsibility. But the recognition from Anne was different in kind. It was not institutional, it was personal. And it was expressed in the particular language that Anne uses, which is the language of action, of presence, of the quiet, deliberate choices she makes about how she positions herself in relation to the people she respects. One of those choices was to allow the public story of their relationship to be told as it actually was, rather than as it might have been managed. In previous eras of the royal family's history, relationships between senior women in the family were often described in terms of tension, competition, or carefully maintained distance. The relationship between Diana and her in-laws was famously complicated and painful. The relationship between Meghan and some other members of the family generated years of commentary and controversy that has still not fully resolved itself. These were relationships shaped, at least in part, by real difficulties, and by the particular pressures that the royal family places on women who enter it from outside. What Anne and Catherine had was different, and the reason it was different is not complicated, even if it is not always easy to articulate. It was different because Catherine understood from very early in her royal life what the institution required of her, and she chose to give it, not by erasing herself or suppressing her own personality, but by channeling both into something that served the broader purpose. She understood that the family she had married into was not just a family. It was an institution with a function and a responsibility and a history that extended far beyond any single member of it. And she treated it accordingly. She took the work seriously. She showed up when it was difficult. She prepared. She learned. And she continued doing all of this even when a significant portion of the media and public commentary was focused on comparing her unfavorably to someone she had never met and could never be. Anne recognized that. She recognized it clearly, and she recognized it early. And as the years went on and Catherine's record of service accumulated, the recognition only deepened. By the time the story of what Anne had done began to spread beyond the close circle who had observed it directly, the royal family was watching the effect that it was having. Senior members of the institution who understood the significance of Anne's endorsement, who understood what it meant when someone with Anne's record and Anne's reputation decided to align herself with another woman's rise, knew that something had shifted, something that was not going to shift back. The palace, for once, did not try to manage the story. It did not try to minimize it or reframe it or redirect the public's attention to something else. Because the palace, like everyone else who was paying close attention, understood that this was not a story that needed managing. It was simply true. And sometimes, in the world of the British royal family, the most powerful things that happen are the ones that are simply true. The story of what Princess Anne gave Catherine is ultimately a story about what women give each other when they have both been forged by the same fire, and they find each other on the other side of it. It is a story that does not fit neatly into the usual categories of royal coverage, because it is not about conflict or scandal or the kind of drama that tends to generate the most attention. It is about something quieter and in the long run far more consequential. It is about the passing of a torch between two of the most significant women in the modern history of the British monarchy. To understand the full weight of what was passed, you need to appreciate what the role of Princess Royal actually represents in the context of the monarchy's modern history. It is not simply an honorific attached to a name. It is a statement about the nature of royal service at its most demanding, its most consistent, and its most unshowy. It is a title that has always been associated with women who do the work without needing the world to applaud them for it. Anne has embodied that definition so completely, for so long, that in the minds of the British public and of the institution itself, the title and the woman have become almost inseparable. Anne was appointed Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Corps of Signals in 1977, when she was 27 years old. She has held that appointment for nearly 5 decades. She has attended the Corps' ceremonies in the United Kingdom and across the Commonwealth. She has met its soldiers in peacetime and in times of active deployment. She knows its history. She cares about its people. The relationship between Princess Anne and the Royal Corps of Signals is not a formal arrangement being maintained out of institutional obligation. It is a genuine human connection built over 48 years of consistent presence and mutual respect. That is what Colonel-in-Chief means when Anne holds the title. It means something real. It means something earned. And it is the standard against which everything else in her royal life has always been measured. When she extends recognition to someone else, she is implicitly measuring them against that same standard. Against the standard of genuine commitment, of sustained presence, of work done not for credit, but because the work itself matters. Catherine's return to public life in 2025 and into 2026 was characterized by exactly this kind of commitment. She did not return tentatively, appearing at a few low-stakes engagements and keeping a careful distance from anything too demanding. She returned with purpose. She attended the Future Workforce Summit in London in November 2025, where she gave her first public speech in more than 2 years. She made her presence felt at Wimbledon in June 2025, appearing alongside William with an ease and warmth that told the public something important. She was back, and she was fully herself, and she had not been diminished by what she had been through. She had been changed by it, but changed in the direction of greater clarity and greater confidence, not lesser. Royal commentators who follow the family closely noted the shift. Richard Fitzwilliams, speaking to a royal channel about Catherine's trajectory into 2026, said that she was the key to the royal family's operations in the months and years ahead, that her influence extended far beyond the conventional scope of a senior royal's impact, that she had become, through a combination of genuine personal charisma, long-cultivated public trust, and a resilience that the public had watched with its own eyes, something that very few members of any royal family anywhere in the world ever achieve. She had become someone the public actually felt they knew. The significance of that is difficult to overstate, because the challenge for any institution like the British monarchy, in an era when deference to inherited authority no longer comes automatically and public support has to be genuinely earned rather than assumed, is that it needs people who the public actually believes in. Not people they simply accept. Not people they tolerate because they do not have a strong opinion either way. People they believe in. People they root for. People whose well-being they care about in a way that feels personal, even though the public has never met them. Catherine has that. She built it over years, and she built it through a combination of grace under pressure, genuine warmth in her public interactions, and an authenticity that has been particularly evident since her cancer diagnosis and recovery. The public has watched her go through something terrifying and come through it without losing the qualities that made them care about her in the first place. That is a rare thing. And Princess Anne, who has spent more than 5 decades watching how people handle the particular pressures that royal life generates, recognized it. But what Anne gave Catherine was not just endorsement, it was orientation, and that distinction matters enormously. Endorsement is what you give someone when you want to signal that you approve of them. It is a public gesture, relatively contained in its scope, that says this person has my support. Orientation is something larger and deeper. It is what you give someone when you are showing them where to stand in the landscape they have entered. When you are saying not simply that you approve of them, but that you understand what they are going to become, and that you want to make sure they understand the territory they will be navigating as they become it. Anne has spent 56 years navigating that territory. She knows every part of it. She knows the parts that are visible from the outside and the parts that only become clear once you have been inside the institution for long enough to see how it actually functions. She knows where the weight falls. She knows which roles carry the most genuine responsibility as opposed to the most public visibility. She knows what it feels like to be the person who makes things work when other people cannot, and she knows the particular satisfaction of that, which is private and not something you can explain to anyone who has not experienced it. What she passed to Catherine, through action and through trust, and through the kind of deliberate positioning that only someone with Anne's standing in the institution could credibly perform, was the knowledge of where to stand. The understanding of what the role requires at its deepest level, below the level of the public-facing duties and the official titles and the formal occasions. The understanding of what it means to be a woman who holds the monarchy together not by sitting at the center of its most visible moments, though Catherine does that too, but by being consistently, reliably, genuinely present in all the moments that are not visible, the ones that matter just as much. This transfer of understanding has been building for years, through engagements attended together and separately, through the gradual accumulation of a shared record of service, through the informal conversations and the small signals that both women have been exchanging across a relationship that has developed slowly and without the kind of drama that would have attracted comment. Because Anne and Catherine are not dramatic women. They are serious women. And serious women who are also intelligent tend to find each other eventually, to recognize in each other the particular quality that they each possess, and to build from that recognition something that is more useful and more durable than friendship alone. The YouGov data from January 2026 captures part of this story in numbers. Catherine at 74%, Anne at 70%. Together, they represent the 2 highest-rated women in the British royal family by a significant margin. Together, they carry more public trust and more genuine affection from the people of Britain than any other pairing within the institution. The fact that they hold those numbers simultaneously, that both of them are at that level at the same moment, is not a coincidence. It reflects the fact that they are, in different ways and with different emphases, doing the same essential thing. They are showing up. They are doing the work. They are being real. The title that Princess Anne granted Catherine was not announced. It was not gazetted or formalized or given a ceremony. It does not appear in any official document. But in the world of the British monarchy, that does not make it less real. Some of the most significant things that happen in that world have always been unannounced. The deepest relationships in that family have always been built in private, in the spaces between the public moments, in the quiet exchanges that never make the newspapers but that shape everything that does. What Anne did, in granting Catherine the recognition of a genuine peer, was to change the landscape of the institution in a quiet but permanent way. She drew a line that said, "Here is someone who has proven herself. Here is someone who is not just filling a role but who has become the role, in the way that only happens when a person has given themselves to it fully and been tested by it and come through. Here is someone you can trust, not just to perform the duties of the Princess of Wales, but to understand what those duties mean and why they matter." And in drawing that line, Anne also did something for the institution itself. She demonstrated that the monarchy is capable of exactly this kind of internal regeneration, that it can recognize its own future and honor it. That the women who have spent the longest time in its service and understand it most deeply are also capable of seeing where the genuine ability lies in the next generation, and of saying so, in the only language that actually matters in this world. The language of action, of trust, of the choice to stand alongside someone and be counted with them. There are those who will say that Anne giving Catherine a new prestigious title is a story about palace politics, about the positioning of key figures within an institution that is always managing its own succession of authority and influence. And there is some truth in that reading. The monarchy is an institution, and institutions operate through their politics as much as through anything else. But to read it only in those terms is to miss what is most significant about it. Because this is also a story about two women. One of them 75 years old, with 57 years of documented royal service behind her, who has never asked for more recognition than her work deserves, and has always been content with the knowledge that she has done what she set out to do. The other 44, back from something that would have changed anyone who went through it, standing at a moment in her royal life where the path ahead is longer than the path behind, and the things she will be asked to do are still becoming clear. Anne looked at Catherine and saw what she needed to see. Not a younger woman to be mentored at a careful distance, not a newcomer who still had things to prove. A woman who had proven them. A woman who had come through the test that the institution and life itself had set for her, and had come through it without losing any of the things that made her worthy of the role she holds. A woman, in short, who deserved the respect that Anne gives only when she is sure it is deserved. And so she gave it, quietly, deliberately, with the particular kind of grace that comes from someone who has spent a lifetime doing things the right way for all the right reasons. The palace held its breath. The people who understood what had happened processed it in their own way and in their own time. And Catherine, for her part, received what was given with the same composure and warmth that she has always brought to the things that matter most to her. Without making a show of it, without performing gratitude for a camera, simply acknowledging in the private way that serious women acknowledge the most important things, that something real had passed between them. The British monarchy has survived for centuries because of moments like this one. Not the grand coronations and the state funerals and the jubilee celebrations, though those matter too. But the quiet moments when one generation recognizes another and chooses to trust it with what it has learned and what it has built. When the oldest and most experienced members of an institution look at those who are coming behind them and decide, deliberately and honestly, that the future is in good hands. Princess Anne left the palace speechless not because she raised her voice, or made demands, or staged a dramatic confrontation with the institution's established order. She left it speechless in the way that she has always done the most significant things in her life, by acting with total clarity and complete conviction, at the moment that she judged the time had come, and letting the weight of the action speak for itself. Catherine received what was given and went on with the work. Because that is also what you do, when someone who has given everything to the same work you have chosen decides to tell you, in the only way that counts, that you belong. The palace held the moment. The world beyond its gates began slowly to understand it. And between two women who had each, in their very different ways, given more than most people will ever be asked to give, something settled into place that will not easily be moved.